What happens when a beloved television legend sits down for what should be a simple interview about her incredible career, only to find herself face to face with a host who seems more interested in creating controversy than celebrating achievements. It only took 39 seconds of tension brewing beneath the surface before everything exploded into one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. The studio lights were bright that morning as Marla Gibbs, the iconic actress known for her groundbreaking roles that changed television forever, walked onto the set of the Tamron Hall show. At 73 years old, she carried herself with the grace and dignity that had made her a household name for decades. Her warm smile and genuine energy filled the room as she settled into the guest chair, ready to share stories about her remarkable journey in entertainment. Tamron Hall, sitting across from her with perfectly styled hair and a designer outfit that probably costs more than most people make in a month, seemed different from the moment the camera started rolling. There was something in her eyes, a certain coldness that didn't match her usual television persona. The audience had no idea they were about to witness something that would leave them gasping in disbelief. "Welcome back to the show," Tamron said, her voice carrying an edge that viewers at home might have missed, but was crystal clear to everyone in the studio. "I'm here with Marla Gibbs, and we're going to talk about her career." She paused, shuffling through her notes with an almost dismissive gesture. "Though, I have to say, some people might wonder if those old shows are really relevant anymore." The comment hit the air like a slap. Mara's eyebrows raised slightly, but her smile remained intact. She had dealt with difficult interviews before, but this felt different. This felt personal. "Well, Tamron," Marla replied with the professionalism that had carried her through 5 decades in the business. "I think when you've touched millions of lives and opened doors for so many people who came after you, that relevance tends to speak for itself." The studio audience murmured their agreement. But Tamron wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed to be just getting started. "Sure, but let's be honest here," Tamron continued, leaning forward in her chair with a look that could freeze water. "The industry has moved on. We have new faces, new voices. Some might say it's time for the older generation to step aside and make room." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mara's smile faltered for just a moment before returning, though now it carried a different quality. "This wasn't just disrespectful, it was cruel. I find that interesting coming from someone who built their entire career standing on the shoulders of people like me," Marla said, her voice still calm, but carrying a strength that made everyone lean forward. "Without pioneers who broke down barriers and fought battles you never had to fight, there wouldn't be a chair for you to sit in today." The audience broke into applause, but Tamron's expression only hardened. She clearly hadn't expected pushback, and she definitely didn't like being called out on national television. "Let's talk about your show," Tamron said, flipping through her cards with visible irritation. "The Jeffersons. Some critics have said it reinforced certain stereotypes. How do you respond to that?" It was a loaded question designed to put Marla on the defensive about work that had actually shattered stereotypes and created opportunities. The show had been groundbreaking, showing an affluent African-American family at a time when that was revolutionary on television. "I think anyone who actually watched the show would know that we did the exact opposite," Marla replied, her patience clearly being tested. "We showed Black excellence, Black success, Black families thriving. We gave representation to people who had never seen themselves reflected on screen in positive ways." "But don't you think," Tamron pressed on, completely ignoring the substance of Marla's answer, "that maybe you could have done more, maybe pushed harder, maybe some of the choices you made were, well, safe?" The word safe hung in the air like an accusation. Here was a woman who had risked everything, who had fought against racism and sexism in an industry that wanted to keep her in a box. Being called safe by someone who had never faced those same battles. Marla sat back in her chair, and for the first time her composure cracked just slightly. "Safe?" she repeated, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. "You think what we did was safe? Do you have any idea what it was like being a Black woman in television in the 1970s? Do you know what we had to endure just to get in the room?" "I'm sure it was difficult," Tamron said with a wave of her hand that somehow managed to be both dismissive and condescending. "But that was then. This is now. And now we need fresh perspectives." The implication was clear, and it was devastating. Tamron was essentially telling a legend that her time was over, that her contributions didn't matter, that she should fade quietly into the background. But Marla Gibbs hadn't become an icon by backing down from fights. She had earned her place through talent, determination, and an unwillingness to accept limits that others tried to place on her. And she wasn't about to start accepting them now. Fresh perspectives, Mara repeated slowly, tasting each word. Is that what you call dismissing the people who made your career possible? Is that what passes for fresh perspective these days? The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras and lights. Even the production crew, who had seen their share of tense interviews, were holding their breath. This was spiraling into something none of them had expected. Tamron's mask was starting to slip. The professional facade was cracking, revealing something uglier underneath. "Look, I respect what you did back then," she said, though her tone suggested anything but respect. "But viewers today want to see people they can relate to. People who understand the current moment. And you think they can't relate to someone who fought for equality and representation?" Mara shot back. "You think they can't connect with someone who refused to be silenced when people told her she didn't belong?" The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Here was Tamron, a black woman who had benefited directly from the paths that Mara and others had carved, essentially telling her predecessor that she was no longer needed or wanted. "I think," Tamron said, her voice taking on an even sharper edge, "that sometimes people need to know when their moment has passed." The words hit like a physical blow. The audience gasped audibly, and several people could be heard making sounds of disapproval. This had crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. Mara sat perfectly still for a moment, processing what had just been said to her. Then slowly she began to smile. Not the warm, welcoming smile she had walked in with, but something different. Something that suggested the gloves were about to come off. "My moment," she said quietly. But every word carried across the studio with perfect clarity has been going on for 50 years, and it's not over yet. The tension in that studio was so thick you could practically taste it. Tamron Hall, clearly rattled by Marlowe's composed but pointed response, decided to double down instead of backing away from the cliff she was walking toward. What happened next would make television history for all the wrong reasons. 50 years, Tamron repeated with a laugh that had absolutely no warmth in it. "That's exactly my point. Don't you think it's time to let someone else have a turn? Someone who actually connects with today's audience." The audacity was breathtaking. Here she was sitting in a chair that existed because of the work Mara and others had done, telling the very person who had made her career possible that she was no longer relevant. The audience was getting restless with murmurs of disapproval growing louder. Mara leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Tamron's face. "Someone who connects with today's audience," she said thoughtfully. "Tell me, Tamron, what do you think connects with people? Is it respect for those who came before you? Is it gratitude for the sacrifices others made? Or is it throwing away your elders the moment you think you don't need them anymore?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Tamron's jaw tightened visibly. She was used to controlling interviews, used to guests who would play along with whatever narrative she wanted to create. Marla Gibbs was not playing along. "I think," Tamron said, her voice getting sharper with each word, "that sometimes older performers get stuck in the past. They can't adapt to how things work now. They expect special treatment just because of what they did decades ago." Special treatment. The phrase echoed through the studio like a bomb going off. Several audience members could be heard making sounds of outrage. This wasn't just disrespectful anymore. It was actively cruel. Mara's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. She sat up straighter, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had earned every ounce of respect she commanded. "Special treatment," she repeated slowly. "Is that what you call basic human decency? Is that what you call acknowledging someone's contributions? Because if treating people with respect is special treatment, then I guess I've been doing it wrong my whole life." The audience erupted in applause, but Tamron seemed oblivious to the fact that the room was turning against her. Instead of recognizing that she had gone too far, she kept pushing. "Look, I'm just being honest here," she said, holding up her hands as if she were the victim in this situation. "This industry moves fast. If you can't keep up, maybe it's time to step back. Make room for people who understand what audiences want today." "And what is it that audiences want today, Tamron?" Mara asked, her voice still calm, but carrying an undertone that suggested she was reaching the end of her patience. "Do they want hosts who tear down the people who built the industry they're working in? Do they want to see legends disrespected on national television?" Tamron's mask slipped even further. "They want authenticity," she snapped. "They want real conversations, Not some sanitized version where we pretend everything is perfect and everyone deserves endless praise just for showing up. Just for showing up, Mara repeated, and for the first time, her voice carried a note of genuine anger. Is that what you think I did? Just showed up? Do you think I just wandered onto television sets for 50 years without earning my place? The studio had gone completely silent, except for the sound of cameras capturing every moment of this disaster unfolding in real time. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out. I think, Tamron said, and everyone could hear that she was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. That sometimes people from your generation think the world owes them something, that you expect to be treated like royalty just because you were around when television was different. The words landed like a physical attack. The audience gasped collectively, and several people could be heard saying, "Oh no." And she didn't just say that. This wasn't just disrespectful. It wasn't just cruel. It was a complete betrayal of everything that should matter in an industry built on the shoulders of pioneers. Marla Gibbs sat perfectly still for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried a power that filled every corner of that studio. "The world doesn't owe me anything," she said, each word precise and deliberate. "I earned everything I got. I fought for every role, every opportunity, every moment of respect. I opened doors that people like you walk through without even having to knock. I faced racism and sexism that you've never had to deal with because I dealt with it first." She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "But you know what the world does owe me, Tamron? Basic human decency. The courtesy of not being attacked by someone who built their career on the foundation I helped lay. The respect of not being told I'm irrelevant by someone who wouldn't have a job if people like me hadn't made it possible." The applause from the audience was thunderous, but Tamron was too far gone to hear it. Instead of recognizing that she had made a terrible mistake, instead of apologizing or trying to salvage the situation, she made it worse. "I didn't build my career on anyone's foundation," she said, her voice rising with indignation. "I worked hard to get where I am. I earned my place through my own talent and dedication." The statement was so tone-deaf, so completely lacking in self-awareness that several audience members actually laughed in disbelief. Here was a woman who had clearly benefited from the civil rights movement, from the women who had fought for representation in media, from the pioneers who had broken down barriers, claiming that she had done it all herself. Mara looked at her for a long moment, and when she smiled, it wasn't pleasant. "Your own talent and dedication," she said. "In an industry that was integrated by people like me, on a network that hired you because people like me proved that Black women could succeed on television. In a chair that exists because people like me fought for the right to be heard." "That's not," Tamron started. But Mara wasn't finished. "You want to talk about earning your place?" Mara continued, her voice getting stronger with each word. "Let me tell you about earning your place. Earning your place is walking into rooms where you're the only person who looks like you. Earning your place is being told you're too Black for white audiences and not Black enough for Black audiences. Earning your place is fighting for every line, every scene, every moment of dignity on screen." The audience was completely riveted, hanging on every word. This wasn't just a television interview anymore. It was a masterclass in grace under pressure, in standing up for yourself, in refusing to be diminished by someone who should have known better. "Earning your place," Mara continued, "is doing all of that and then watching someone who benefited from your work tell you that your time is over, that you don't matter anymore, that you need to step aside for someone fresher, someone more relevant." Tamron's face had gone red. Whether from embarrassment or anger, it was impossible to tell. "I never said you didn't matter," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Didn't you?" Mara asked quietly. "Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what you said. You told me my work was irrelevant. You told me I was stuck in the past. You told me I expected special treatment. You told me my moment had passed." Each accusation hit like a hammer blow, and Tamron seemed to shrink with each one. The realization of what she had done was finally starting to dawn on her, but it was too late to take any of it back. "You told me," Mara continued, "that I needed to make room for people who understand what audiences want today. As if fighting for equality and representation somehow went out of style. As if dignity and respect were outdated concepts." The studio was so quiet that every word carried with perfect clarity. This was a moment that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. A perfect example of what happens when arrogance meets wisdom, when disrespect encounters dignity. But Mara wasn't done yet. The silence that followed was deafening. Tamron Hall sat frozen in her chair, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of her mistake. But Marla Gibbs was far from finished. What happened next would become the most quoted moment in talk show history. A masterpiece of dignity triumphing over arrogance. "But you know what, Tamron?" Mara said, her voice carrying a strength that seemed to fill the entire studio. "I'm going to do something for you that you clearly never learned to do for others. I'm going to show you respect even when you don't deserve it." The audience held their breath. After everything Tamron had said, after all the disrespect and cruelty, Mara was taking the high road. It was a moment of grace that made Tamron's behavior look even worse by comparison. "I'm going to tell you something that might save your career," Mara continued, leaning forward slightly. "The people who came before you are not your enemies. They're not obstacles to overcome or outdated relics to be discarded. They're the reason you have opportunities. They're the foundation your success is built on." Tamron tried to interrupt, but Mara held up her hand with the authority of someone who had earned the right to be heard. "When you tear down the people who made your career possible, you're not showing strength," Mara said. "You're showing weakness. You're showing that you don't understand where you came from or what it took to get you where you are." The truth of those words hit the studio like a physical force. Several audience members were nodding vigorously, and you could see people in the crew looking at each other with expressions that said everything about how they viewed what was happening. "I fought battles so that you wouldn't have to," Mara continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I faced doors that were slammed in my face so that yours would be open. I dealt with people who told me I didn't belong so that you would never have to hear those words." Tamron's face had gone completely pale. The reality of what she had done was hitting her like a freight train, but she seemed incapable of finding words to respond. "And instead of saying thank you," Mara continued, "instead of acknowledging that journey, instead of showing the basic respect that any decent person would show to their elders, you decided to attack me on your own show in front of your own audience." The audience was completely silent, mesmerized by this display of controlled power. This wasn't anger. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a masterclass in how to handle disrespect with dignity. "You told me I was irrelevant," Mara said, counting off on her fingers. "You told me I was stuck in the past. You told me I expected special treatment. You told me my moment had passed. You told me I needed to step aside." Each point landed like a precision strike, and Tamron visibly flinched with every accusation. "But here's what you didn't understand, sweetheart," Mara said. And the word sweetheart carried more power than any insult could have. "My moment isn't something that passes. My moment is every time a young black woman sees herself represented on television. My moment is every time someone fights for dignity and respect in this industry. My moment is right now, showing you and everyone watching what real strength looks like." The studio erupted in applause. But Mara wasn't finished yet. "You want to know what connects with audiences today?" she asked, her voice cutting through the applause. "Audacity connects with audiences. Respect connects with audiences. Treating people with dignity connects with audiences, not this petty, small-minded attempt to tear down someone who paved the way for you." Tamron finally found her voice, but it came out as barely more than a whisper. I didn't mean." "Oh, but you did mean it," Mara interrupted, her voice still controlled but absolutely unforgiving. "You meant every word. You came into this interview with an agenda to diminish me, to make me look outdated and irrelevant. You wanted to position yourself as the new voice, the fresh perspective by tearing down the old guard." The accuracy of that assessment was written all over Tamron's face. She had been caught, exposed, and there was no way to deny it. "But you made one critical mistake," Mara continued. "You forgot that respect isn't something you take from others. It's something you earn, and you can't earn respect by showing disrespect." The wisdom in those words seemed to echo through the studio. This was more than just a celebrity spat. This was a lesson in basic human decency being delivered by someone who had earned the right to teach it. "You want to be seen as authentic?" Mara asked. "Then be authentically grateful for the people who made your success possible. You want to connect with audiences? Then show them what it looks like to honor the struggles that came before you." Tamron looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. The confident, aggressive host who had started this interview was gone, replaced by someone who was clearly realizing the full scope of her mistake. "I have spent 50 years in this business," Mara said, her voice carrying the weight of every one of those years. "I have been disrespected by people who thought they were better than me, who thought I didn't belong, who thought my time was over. But you know what? I'm still here, and I'll still be here long after people forget this pathetic display you've put on today." The power in that statement was undeniable. This wasn't just confidence. This was the unshakable certainty of someone who had faced every challenge and emerged stronger. "But I want you to remember something, Tamron," Mara said, standing up from her chair with the grace and dignity that had defined her entire career. "When you're sitting in this chair 20 years from now and some young host decides that you're outdated and irrelevant, remember this moment. Remember how it felt to have someone dismiss everything you've accomplished." She paused at the edge of the stage, looking back at Tamron, who sat frozen in her chair. "And maybe then you'll understand why respect matters, why gratitude matters, why lifting people up instead of tearing them down is what real strength looks like." The audience rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation as Marla Gibbs walked off that stage with her head held high, leaving behind a host who had just learned the hardest lesson of her career. Tamron sat in stunned silence, the weight of her mistakes crushing down on her as the applause continued. In 39 seconds, Tamron Hall had gone from confident host to cautionary tale. She had tried to diminish a legend and instead had revealed the smallness of her own character. She had attempted to position herself as the future by dismissing the past, only to show that she didn't understand either. But Marla Gibbs had done something far more powerful than simply defending herself. She had shown an entire audience what dignity looked like under pressure. She had demonstrated that true strength comes not from tearing others down, but from lifting yourself up. She had proven that respect is earned through decades of perseverance, not taken through moments of cruelty. As the cameras stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, one thing was crystal clear. In a battle between grace and arrogance, between wisdom and ignorance, between respect and disrespect, there had been no contest at all. Marla Gibbs had won without ever lowering herself to Tamron Hall's level. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone watching why legends become legends in the first place. The interview was over, but the lesson would last forever.